ready as we're going to be? Good evening to you all. Welcome to what is technically session 4 of CLI, since we'll go ahead and count State of the City as the third session of the class. Did everybody get a chance to go? It feels like I saw everybody there. If you did not get a chance to go, again, you can go to the city's YouTube page and you can see how the event unfolded, or at the very least take a look at the video that Matthew prepared. It was a really fun one this year, kind of switching roles a little bit with the members of the council asking questions of our department directors. It was pretty interesting, especially things that are happening in the city. A reminder to all, if you haven't, if you've forgotten, since it has been a month since we last joined in this room, bathrooms right out the door on that side. We'll take a little break in between. We have one of the most important parts of the city to discuss here at front. After Leslie gives you a little bit of an overview on budget, we will have a discussion on economic development, which is, of course, key to the city in many, many ways, as Janine will tell you. And then we were going to have a third presentation, I should say, tonight from revenue development. Unfortunately, the head of that particular section of the city is out ill, so I'm going to go through his slides really, really quickly, but I am going to ask him to come back and give a full presentation. But I do want to make sure you guys have that in your repertoire of stuff from the city. Okay, any other questions coming up? There is obviously a little bit of talk about the state of the city I would love to bring up if we have a little time before the end of the night. I would love to get a little feedback from some of you. Obviously, there's also some things happening within the city you may have questions about. We can save those also for the end of class, if that's okay. But let's get started with our relatively new, couple of years, finance director for the city of Apache Junction. Comes from the city of Scottsdale, and maybe she'll tell you a little bit more about her background, because I just learned a little bit more about that background this week. But she's going to tell you all about the city budget process, which, strangely enough, is just underway. We're quite in the middle of it at this point. The idea being you need to have a budget in place by the beginning of the fiscal year. When is the beginning of the fiscal year? The governmental year, if you will. Any idea? July 1st. Very good. Very, very good. Got to have that in place. At least for city governments. Federal government's a little different. City and state, right? So without further ado, our finance director, Leslie, it's all yours.
All right, I hope you all will bear with me tonight. This is my first time giving this presentation. So you guys are my guinea pigs for what we have going on here tonight. A little bit about me. As Al said, I come from the city of Scottsdale. I worked there for 10 years as their finance manager. Prior to that, I worked at ASU in capital development, and prior to that, I worked for the state retirement. So pretty much I've always worked in government. I have 22 years in government now. I went to ASU and got an undergraduate in business with a core in economics and also accounting. Got my CPA, and then while I was working, I went back and got my master's in public administration to keep that learning going and to try new areas within government. So budgeting is a lot of fun, at least for me. For most people, maybe they don't really care for it, and I'm assuming most people have to do some kind of budget, whether it's formal or whether it's just kind of in their head or just kind of looking at their bank balances. Pretty much everybody has to follow some kind of a budget. So what I'm going to ask you guys tonight is, how would you define a budget? And when you budget, what is your goal? And how do you do it? So if you have any volunteers to offer what they do for budgeting in their own personal life, or maybe for their business or whatever, their work or whatever they do. Any volunteers? Don't make me pick people, because I will. Do you have the microphone? Yeah, just in general, like, how would you define the budget? What would you expect the city does for a budget? So what's the purpose of it?
I would generally expect the city's budget to be sort of along the lines of a 501c. You're going to use projections based on what income you expect and revenue that you intend to garner, and that will be the budget that you set forth. Depending on what your goals are, you may not reach that budget. You may need to later make adjustments, just like anybody would have to do with their household budget. If I'm out sick one day and I don't bring in that extra $100, well, then I may need to make an adjustment to whether or not I pay my cable. Same process applies to city government and all governments.
Just about anybody, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, excellent, very good. Anybody else want to throw anything in? Just how do you define budgeting, and how do you do it for yourself?
Well, I'm going to say for the nonprofit that I work for, the two budgeting systems that we use, of course, is for the programming that we have at the food bank. And then also our grant funding, we have to budget for that programming. So that would be the revenue that's coming in and how we're going to use the funds if we're able to successfully win the grant.
Okay, that's excellent, yeah. So the city follows very similar processes. Ours is a little bit complex. We have a lot of rules and regulations we have to follow, and it actually takes us 6 months to go through a budget process, which is by the time, 6 months in advance, it's hard to really know exactly what you're doing, but we've got to start. And we finalize our budget in June. We start in January. And so right now, we're just, like Al said, we're just starting the process of our fiscal year 23 budget. State law requires that all cities have a balanced budget, and that means that all of our planned revenues have to exceed or at least match our planned expenditures. And it also requires that we allow a process for public input. And so I'm going to show you a little bit later on our actual budget calendar, and we'll go through the steps that we have to take over the 6 months. So things that we want to consider while we're setting the budget is, what are the council priorities, right? Because there are elected representatives, they're representing the citizens, and they have ideas of what they want to see us do with public funds. So they meet once a year, and they go to a retreat, and they talk about the priorities for the city, and then they pass that down to us. And there's a certain amount of strategic planning that goes on in order to try to meet all of those goals too. We can never meet them all. There's never enough to do everything that we want to do, so we have to prioritize. And another thing we have to do is understand the economic environment. So there's a lot of things that occur, as we all have experienced with COVID. That was just such a major disruption to everybody's life that impacts how we budget and what we do. We were already in the middle of a budget cycle when that hit, and it just changed everything for us. It just upside down. But we also publish an annual financial report every year, and that tells us how did we do, what did we really spend, and were prices higher, lower, how close did we come into our budget, and those are audited numbers that we publish on our website if anybody's interested in reading those. And by the way, it was originally called Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, but they have put out, the GASB, which is Governmental Accounting Standards Board, put out a statement and asked us to rename it Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. So if you see CAFR or ACFR, same thing. But we will be renaming ACFR as of this year. Okay. So there's a lot of things that a city is required to do, and we have to budget for those. We don't have any choice in that. But there's a lot of things that the citizens and the community just want us to do, and we also budget for that too. So we are required to have a police force. Now, we could have our own police force, or we could contract out for it if, like, really small communities might use a sheriff's department or might use something else, but we are required to have a police presence. And then there are things that our city does. We do parks and recreation, we do streets, we do libraries, we do senior services. We just have a lot of things that over time have developed programs, and that's what the city council priorities have been and what the citizens have asked us to do. And if I'm going too fast, let me know. I'll try to take a breath. Slow down. And if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask them right through the presentation. Okay. Another consideration is just our vision and our mission statement and what we want to do. We want to think about our businesses, we want to think about our residents, and we want to think about our visitors. We get a lot of visitors through Apache Junction, and that makes a big part of our economy. So we want to be a friendly, welcoming community, and so that sets some of our priorities and goals. And quality of life for those who live here. We want them to have the parks and recreation and animal control and the things that make their quality of life, good schools, although we don't control that, good. We want people to come and live here and enjoy living here. Okay, so let's talk about the budget calendar. Right now, actually, how do I get to the budget calendar again? Escape? And there we go. So every year, we develop a budget calendar, and it kind of looks like this, and it starts in January, where I'm just distributing this calendar to the whole city. And then we have steps that we take throughout the calendar. And I'm going to go through these kind of one at a time, but this is just kind of what it looks like. The stuff in red and the stuff in blue, those are legal requirements that we have to follow with our budgeting process. So they're kind of highlighted and brought to the attention. So we have, we do the budgeting for the city, and we also do the budgeting for the water district, which is very closely related to the city. And then I just want to hit, nope. Okay, and so we set a new base budget every year, and the base budget is really just last year's budget, and we call this incremental budgeting. It's not the only way to budget, and some people would argue it's not the best way to budget. Some people say everybody should start at zero and justify everything that they want, but that's kind of administratively cumbersome, because we have programs in place and we know we're going to continue those programs, and we know what it cost last year. So chances are it's going to cost the same, or maybe a little bit more, or maybe a little bit less, depending on what we had involved in there. It changes over time. Yeah. We use last year's budget to start with, and we do take into consideration our actuals, but our budget actually just copies over, and then we go in and we change. Every department has an opportunity to go in and say, oh, well, we thought we were going to use this, but we didn't, so we'll take that off. Or we had fewer visitors and didn't need this, you know, so they make those adjustments every year, and we do have to publish our budget to actuals every year as well. So we know how close we came. But yeah, we start with the budget. And that's called incremental budget. There's the zero budgeting. There's a couple other ways of budgeting that are kind of popular, but it just makes sense for us to use the incremental budgeting. So in February, as of February 28th, all the departments have gone through their budget, and they have said increase, decrease. They have to write a justification and detail for every single line item. And that all gets turned into us, and we have a committee that will sit around and go through every single budget and say yay or nay, or we need a little more information, or whatever the case may be. And so right now we're just looking at expenditures. So that's only half the budget. The other side is the revenue budget. And the thing with the revenue budget is it's a little bit more difficult because we don't have a lot of revenue sources for the city. We have sales tax, we have state shared tax, and we have some fees and charges, and we have, let's see, the state shared, the intergovernmental accounts for quite a bit of it, but we don't have a lot of control over that, which you'll find out. So we can predict the sales taxes pretty easily, but the state announces what they're going to be giving to us in March. So we don't know our final revenue numbers till March. So that'll be coming next month. And then we'll be finalizing our revenue. Then we have to go back to those expenditures, say, are we going to have enough revenue to cover all those expenditures? And that's when we have to start prioritizing. And maybe cutting or maybe pushing some things out, or just kind of adjusting to make sure that we can cover everything. We also have to have a little bit of contingency, because things come up that if we don't have it in the budget, we can't spend it. So we have to be prepared for those little emergencies, like flooding, or lights go out, or or something that happens that we need to go out and do it that we weren't prepared for. And at the end of March, after the budget committee has gone through everything and worked with the departments and refined it, it goes to the city manager, and the city manager will review it. He'll make recommendations, and in April, he gives that to the mayor and the city council to review, and they hold public work sessions. And so those will be coming up in April, and in May, we'll have public hearings, and we'll do a tentative budget adoption, which is done by resolution, and then in June, we'll do a final budget adoption. And then that sets the budget for the new year. And we cannot spend any money for the new year until that is done. So I know you probably have heard, like, when the state is behind and they're like, oh, we're just not going to pay any, or the federal government, we're just not going to pay anybody because we're not done with our budget. Yeah, we don't do that. We pretty much get it done before the new fiscal year starts. Okay, so we have what we call, I thought I had one that said fund accounting, but maybe not. How do I go back? We actually have a lot of different funds, and we use fund accounting. I know this may be a little bit boring, but in order to keep track of all the revenue sources and expenditures for a certain type of fund, we keep them separate, and they can act like their own accounting entity. So we can do a report on each one of those. So the general fund covers all of our general services, the police, the animal control, the parks, the library, all of that stuff. The HERF fund is restricted, and that is because we get money from the state, HERF money, which is Highway User Revenue Fund. They give us money, and we can only use it on streets. We also have a little bit of money that comes in from Pinal County for streets, and that also goes into there. And then we also get a lot of grants, and each grant is individual and unique, and we can only spend it however the grantor says we can. So these are restricted special revenue sources with restricted spending, and so they're recorded and tracked separately. And then we have a few other special revenue funds that are a little bit smaller, like, I don't know if any of you live in a lighting district, but if you do, there's like a little tiny bit of property tax on your account, on your property tax bill that will go to paying the electricity for those street lights. And there's a few of them in the city. Then we have senior services, the streets tax that we get from sales tax. So we have a 2.4 sales tax in the city of Apache Junction, and 2% of that is used for general government services. 0.2% is reserved for street repair and maintenance, and 0.2 is reserved for, and I'll cover that in the revenue too, is reserved for public safety retirement pension. We'll kind of go over that a little bit too. And then we have a library fund too. None of this is money coming from us. It's all coming from other people, but we're stewards of that money, and we have to spend it according to how they ask us to spend it. Right, yes.
Grant process this last with COVID was quite expensive. This next round may not be, so there may be less funding.
Absolutely. There have been, the CARES Act and the ARPA funding have put so much money in the hands of the governments and in the people. So it actually, I think that's the biggest grant spending I've ever seen. So that's kind of changing the way things are done, and it'll impact what we're doing for years. So for a couple years anyway. And I think I kind of went over this a little bit. We have the three major sources. It covers 80% of the general fund expenses. It's sales tax, state revenue sharing, which is the income tax, and then the state shared tax. So the city doesn't levy a property tax for city services. The street lighting district does. That's considered kind of a separate entity, but it's only for those residents who live in those districts. And it's a tiny, tiny little amount. The state shared taxes, the state revenue sharing and the state sales tax, those are based on our population. Okay, relative to total population, so this last census, ours came out lower than it had been the previous. So that means we'll get less money. while other cities have gone up, that means we get even less money because our proportionate share is even lower. So that's something that we have to take into consideration when we budget. We won't actually know what we're getting until March, but that is something that we have to take into consideration. And I think I kind of went over this a little bit. Our sales tax is our largest source of revenue, and 2% is spent on any kind of governmental service, but 0.4% is restricted to very specific purposes. These 0.4, the 0.2 for PSPRS and the 0.2 for streets, they have a sunset. So they won't be around forever unless they're renewed. So one of them sunsets in 2025 and one of them sunsets in 2026. So if council and people, if the council votes to renew it, then they'll continue on. If they don't, they'll stop. Okay. Beautiful graph. This is just kind of a graphical presentation of the revenues we receive. A huge amount from, you can see almost 50% is from city sales tax, and almost 50% is from shared revenue. This year, I'm expecting that shared revenue to go down, or for fiscal year 23. So we'll kind of see how that pans out and how much of an impact we're going to have on the city. Sales tax has been increasing. So I don't know if you know this, but this isn't just an Apache Junction phenomena. You would think that sales tax would go down. And with COVID, revenues are going down, but sales tax have gone up. Not every category, but some categories have. So if you have a bed tax, which I don't think we have any in Apache Junction, but really heavy tourist cities like Scottsdale, who have a lot of hotels and resorts and stadiums and things like that, they were heavily impacted in that tourism industry. Whereas we have retail and restaurants, they were fine, they went up. And also we have the online sales now with the Wayfair legislation that went through. We now benefit from anybody who's buying online in the city. We get the taxes for that. So we can see our taxes pretty much have been increasing, and that's been beneficial for us, for sure. Income tax. This is state shared revenue. It went down a little bit. Well, I'm not, actually it might not. We budgeted a little bit less in 21-22. I don't have the final numbers of what we actually got, and same with state sales tax. State sales tax did well, just like city sales taxes did, so that went up. So here's the thing: if our share is going down, but sales tax are going up, we might not have as much of an impact as we thought. So it's kind of hard to tell what we're actually going to get. Hopefully it won't be too much, and we won't be cutting anything. These are the services that we are providing as a city. Some cities provide fire, and some provide sewer, but those are not, and water too. Those aren't provided by City of Apache Junction. Those are provided by independent districts. So we do police, parks, library, streets, planning, and a lot of other little services, and the courts, of course. And this is another graph of where it goes. See the big blue? That's your police force. That's a popular program. Everybody seems to really support police in the city, and I think that's a good thing. But the majority of our public service is in the police area. Did I go backwards? I think I did. Okay, so the Highway User Revenues Fund is based from the HERF, and then also there's a little bit, Pinell County contributes 1.1% of their shared sales tax for roads, and we use that. This is, I want to say this is audited like every 2 or so years. We just went through an audit with Pinell County for this tax, and they come in and they make sure that we've actually spent on what we said we were going to spend on, and that we're actually doing the projects that we said we were going to do. So there's plenty of oversight. And HERF collections, not a lot of variation there. hopefully it'll stay up good. And we can continue working on the streets and rely on those funds. And you can see here's how we spend it. 15% on engineering, the rest is just on streets maintenance. That's repaving and improvements. Where we are now, and I don't know, I think I set a timer. I want to make sure that I'm not shortchanging you guys. I'm only 7 minutes in. Okay, I'm too fast. So I've been going to a lot of economic conferences, seminars, because part of forecasting our revenues is really knowing what's going on in the world and what's going to happen here. And right now, I don't know how familiar you are with what's going on, but they just released inflation numbers, and they were at 7.5%, which is huge. We haven't seen that kind of inflation in years, and nobody was really expecting it to be that high. So there's definitely going to be some consequences to having these high inflation numbers. And some of the reasons why we have high inflation numbers are because we're still having supply chain issues. We haven't fully recovered, and we have unemployment. So even though the state actually has almost gone back to their pre-pandemic unemployment levels, there's still a lot of people hiring, and they can't find people to work. And so some of that can be maybe there's just a skills mismatch. People don't want to work in those industries, or they're not qualified to work in them. And some of it is just because a lot of people left the market, and they're just not coming back right now. They just don't want to work right now. It's too risky, or they just want to kind of wait and see what happens. We also have a retirement population, people who retire and return to work, and a lot of them aren't coming back to work right now. So we are still experiencing some unemployment. Even though our unemployment rates are good, they're based on what they consider the market of employable people. So if you're not in the market, you're not counted in that number. So a lot of people who have dropped out of the market just won't be counted. And that's why we're maybe seeing like we're having a hard time hiring for certain things, or you see a lot of for hire signs around. And we absolutely expect interest rates to rise. And I expect them to rise more than once this year. So good for savers, bad for borrowers. So, and as a city, we do both. We have investments, and we also borrow money. We don't, actually, we have, as a city, we have very, very low debt relative to all other cities in the state. So we don't have a lot of debt, and all of it is done at a pretty reasonable interest rates. But those interest rates are going to rise. So if we were to go out and try to borrow, lease, finance, we will be paying more. And we're definitely going to be paying more for goods and services. So not only are we, the wages are being pressured to go up, but all the goods and services are going up. And so when you're looking for chemicals or supplies or construction materials, all of that is really going up in cost. So we're having to take all of that into consideration for this upcoming budget. And I think that's all I have. There's a couple of links that you can use to go to the website. You can look at the CAFR, you can look at the Model City, ACFR, the Model City tax code, and look at some of the other, I think that's the budget, state budget, and then the state legislation to see what's coming. We're also monitoring, I also spend time monitoring what kind of legislation is passing, because a lot of time that also affects our budget, especially, you know, not especially, but one of the big ones has been the PSPRS, and that's why we have a dedicated sales tax to that, because of that unfunded liability and, you know, the legislation that's being passed regarding any kind of retirement benefits affects us, because we have to pay for retirement for all of our employees. So we have to monitor those kinds of things. And there's other legislation that affects us too. So I think one of the interesting things that is going through legislation now is that they're trying to redo their tax system, and they're making all the cities pay for it or pay a portion of it. So that's something that we have to budget for. And we didn't get any say in it. We're just told you have to pay for it. So we have to monitor that kind of thing and prepare for it. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
It's based a lot on fuel. If we are continuing to move to electric vehicles, or hybrid even, that reduces the amount of fuel being consumed, which means the tax is going down. How are you taking that into account?
We don't actually control that estimate or those numbers at all. The state controls that, and they just tell us what we're going to get. But you're right, as we move more to electric vehicles, unless they're taxing that, we will get less money. And in addition to that, with this particular economy, with a lot of people staying home, and now more people moving to remote work, that may also impact how much fuel tax they get too. So it's very possible that can go down. It just kind of depends on how people feel about the economy. It could be that everybody's like, oh, I'm going to travel more, and I'm going to spend time out in the outdoors with my RV and spend a lot more on fuel. It's kind of hard to predict, so.
I know that the state has set aside in its budget for this year a little bit more money for DPS and for roads in particular, I-10 and a couple others. I think that's maybe a little bit of a reaction to making sure that that's, a dedicated part of the budget rather than
Sure.
depending on anything else, gas
Yeah,
tax
the
or anything.
state, I saw a state presentation by the state treasurer on their budget recently, and the state has a lot of money despite despite all of their programs. So they are they're actually planning on paying down their PSPRS unfunded liability with cash, basically. And they're setting aside rainy day funds, and they're kind of preparing and renewing themselves, and they have a lot of cash flow right now, so they're doing really well, which is good.
Other questions?
How does remote workers affect, say your office is out of state, that remote revenue?
How does remote workers
Yeah,
affect our offices out
I
of
live in
state?
Arizona, but my office is in Kansas.
Are you well, for the city, we don't have any offices out of state. Are you talking about just like businesses in
The
general?
people who live here,
Oh,
working
so maybe
remotely.
they have a job in Arizona, but they live out of state? That's a really good question. I believe they have to pay payroll taxes, and I know this because of a story. But if they have employees who work out of state, they have to pay taxes, income taxes, in the state that they work in. So if people out of state are working in Arizona, we'll still get those income taxes, which is excellent. The state gets them, not the city. But we get a share of that, so it would help us too. So yeah, that could change dynamics too, as the remote work is how deep it's gone and where it's going to go. It's really going to have an impact on society, and it's kind of too early to tell how it's going to go. So.
I know it does also affect overhead costs, because of course, if you're working from home, you're not using overhead costs that you would normally use if
Right.
you were in an office,
That's
which
true.
includes
There's
utilities. Yep.
There's a lot of empty space and a lot of offices, and that's a very big expense for any business, for the government and any private business, to have a building, to keep it heated, to keep it maintained, and all of that stuff. So if people are finding out that they need to do less of that, then maybe they can save money in there. Of course, that impacts the real estate market, puts more real estate on the market. So, some of these are just kind of rolling. It's hard to tell I'm not really good at predicting what's going to happen, but I do predict there's going to be some serious changes like we've never seen before.
Other questions? Everybody ready to go and tackle the budget? We did have one question from online that I think I want to maybe broaden out a little bit, and that is, if a citizen had an idea that they would like to get into the city budget, something that either the city is not doing right now, a service, a program, something, is there any way for the general public to, and my first thought is, of course, they could always propose it to a council member, and the council member could, bring it to the process. But, really, that's kind of late in the going. So what would your advice be, I guess?
Actually, it is late now, maybe, but not too late. So definitely, if you're interested in that, I would say reach out to your city council. And you don't have to wait till the budget season to do it. Anytime you have an idea or you have a group of people that want something in the city, that's who you need to contact first, because they're really setting the vision and the goals and the priorities for the city. Another thing you can always do, if there's something in the budget, you can attend the public hearings and you can comment on those items, and you can ask and say, I want you to consider this during those public hearings as well.
Very good. Okay. All good? So now you can just run the whole city budget now, right? I hope you will take part in our process, because as our finance director indicated, there is a process in which the public can take part. There will be public hearings held at council meetings as we get closer, according to that calendar, and everyone is welcome to take part in that. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody good?
Say one last thing.
Sure.
I was really impressed with how the turnout and how many people are interested in what we do and learning more about the government, and maybe even participating, because it's just a really great thing, and I'm impressed. Thanks.
Miss Leslie Duresh, thank you very much. Okay, everybody, anybody want to take a quick 5-minute break? We okay? All right. Make sure everybody signs in so I know who was here and not here. And you know how to do this. I'm going to let Miss Janine do this. Okay. A couple of reminders that everybody should be aware of, and that is, does everybody know what's going on this weekend in the city? If you don't, I will dock you. You'll get a C for the day. If you are unaware, this is one of the busiest, if not one of the most fun weekends in the city of Apache Junction. Has been actually the Apache Junction Independent published a very interesting history of Lost Dutchman days. It actually goes back to the mid-'60s. So this weekend is Lost Dutchman Days weekend. That includes the rodeo, the carnival, and of course the parade on Saturday morning. It goes on at the rodeo grounds, if you don't know where that is, Tomahawk and Lost Dutchman. And it begins, the rodeo proper begins on Friday, and the carnival also on Friday. And it continues through Saturday and Sunday. The city will have a booth. If you want to come and see me, you can come and see me if you'd like. The parade is on Saturday morning, right down Apache Trail. I will also be there. You ready?
Ready.
Okay, here is the pride of Joliet, Illinois. She has been with the city for 20 years, and has one of the most challenging jobs, I think, that anyone has in the city, and that is economic development. And as, of course, Leslie alluded to, one of our biggest sources of revenue is sales tax. Well, if that is one of your biggest sources of revenue, you have to be really careful about how you raise sales tax. Where does sales tax come from? Retail, a lot of that kind of stuff that we see in the city. How does that happen? That lady. And she's going to tell you all about it.
Nope.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the Director of Economic Development for the City of Apache Junction, Janine Solly.
Thank you, Al. Thank you all for having me here tonight. I'm just really excited to chat with you. And as Leslie said, I think it's amazing that people give their time to come and learn about how your city functions and operates. So kudos to every one of you for showing up, and hopefully you will get more involved, boards and commissions and in leadership roles throughout the community. So thank you is what I want to say first. I've prepared some slides that I'm happy to go through. Feel free to jump in with questions at any point in time. I'm happy to make this more conversational than presentation oriented, but I'll get started. So really kind of want to start with economic development, and people are like, well, what is it? What is economic development? And economic development truly is broadly about kind of identifying the strengths and opportunities of your community Pairing that with the vision of the constituents and the leaders of the community. What do you want your community to be? And then kind of pairing those things together and creating partnerships that help you all achieve your goals. Well, what does that mean? It's really about creating jobs and a good, solid economy, and all of those things, when you have disposable income, can really enhance quality of life overall. So it's really about building community based on economics. Economic development, you'll hear terms about business retention, expansion, and attraction a lot of times. And a lot of times the headlines are all about business attraction. You'll see, you know, so-and-so company XYZ landed in Mesa, or company, you know, Nike landed over in the West Valley. And those are really what really gets the headlines. And they're critical. They're really important to grow your community because it grows the base. When you have a company land in a community or in your nearby community, it creates jobs. It generates property tax, it creates sales tax in many instances. It can create business-to-business opportunities. So we're seeing right now a lot of the semiconductor industry with TSMC landing up in North Phoenix. You've got a lot of supply chain companies that want to be nearby there, so it attracts other companies into the area. So attraction's a very, what they say in economic development, the sexy thing, because you're landing the big projects. But just as critically important, and especially in a community like Apache Junction, are the first two, the retention and the expansion. So much easier to retain what you have in your community than it is to attract something new. So it's really important that we support our local businesses in any way that we can. In economic development, part of it is finding out if they need resources or if they need assistance to make sure that their business is going to remain viable, then we try to find ways and resources to help them out. Economic development is definitely a team sport. We don't do it alone. And it starts at a national level, but it actually starts very locally here at the state level with the Arizona Commerce Authority. So the Arizona Commerce Authority, known as ACA, we love acronyms, is the state's arm that does outreach to nationally and internationally to recruit companies to Arizona. And then the Greater Phoenix Economic Council has a similar role, but they do that more on a regional level. So they do that for the region. We've got 21 cities and towns that are part of GPEC. We are one of them. We've been with them for maybe 10 years or so. And we're all members, along with some private industry partners that support them in their efforts to go recruit businesses to Arizona. And then there's another list of other partner agencies that all play a role in economic development, about being business friendly, about having great policy, good leaders that support and understand the importance of job growth and good quality business within the community. So very much a team sport. How do we engage with these other groups, though? And really it depends on your city and town. All cities and towns are different. There are different strengths and opportunities in each and every community. But really, when business recruitment is happening, they're looking at communities on paper. So what I wanted to do was kind of just give you an overview of what Apache Junction looks like on paper and what businesses will consider when they're determining what kind of workforce is in an area and what characteristics of that community might make them a good fit. Is there a good fit? You're not going to go somewhere where you don't have the basic necessities that you need. So why is data even relevant? A lot of people don't like data. A lot of people are data nerds, but I'm going to go through it by providing an example. And my example is that it's not a surprise to anyone in this room, probably, that we tend to have an older population here in Apache Junction. We skew a little bit older. We've got a lot of retirees, and that just kind of skews our median age upward. And that becomes relevant for a business when they're looking for a workforce. So if you have, and you can see on our chart, our median age is 52.3. That means somebody in their career is probably more likely looking toward retirement options and what's ahead for them in the next 10 or so years, versus a community that may have some 30-year-olds that are new in their careers or, second-tier career, maybe two, individuals in the household working, and that makes up the employment pool that you might be able to pull employees from to man your business. So as I mentioned, 52.3 in Apache Junction is our median age. In the US, it's 38.5 years old. And when we compete for businesses or market share, we're not only competing nationally, but we're also competing some of our neighbors close by. So in the East Valley, I just pulled a few for an example. Anybody want to take a guess at Mesa's median age? Ish. Mesa's 35.9. Gilbert, because these are some of the hot neighboring markets, is 33.9. Queen Creek, 34.1. So when you look at those markets and somebody's looking to where do I want to locate my business, if workforce is important, they might tend to look in some of those younger markets. Phoenix is 33.8, surprisingly. They're even younger. But I'll throw it in there. Somebody beat us. Anybody want to guess what Sun City is? 73. Okay, so we're youngsters compared to Sun City. And Wickenburg is 60.6. So you can kind of tell, and you kind of, if you know a little bit about these communities, some of those numbers wouldn't surprise you. Another example I'm going to give you, though, and Al mentioned this one, not necessarily related to living wage jobs, but retail and food establishments. They're also key when they look at data. They key in specifically on median household incomes, household size, their fixed, if a residence is on a fixed income or disposable income, what they have for disposable income. And they really depend on where they'll locate based on that immediately surrounding kind of demographic of the neighborhood. They're also, though, looking at growth trajectories. Simply put, they want to be in growing markets where people have growing spending capacity. So that's where they want to locate those retail and food establishments. So again, we'll take another example here and look at Apache Junction. Our median household income is $45,653. Compared to the city of Mesa, which is $58,181. And then I've neglected to say, our growth population from the 2010 census to the 2020 census, we went from 35 to 38,000-ish, and that represents a 7.42% increase in population in that 10-year span. Mesa had a 14.85% population growth in that span, so about double what we did here. Now, if we really want to get fancy, we'll look at Gilbert and their median household income of $96,857, and they saw a 28.5% increase in population. So when you hear of businesses and restaurants and places locating in those particular locations, when you look at the data, it starts to make sense. And then the last one I'll give is Queen Creek. Queen Creek, actually, this is kind of a funny story. We went to an ICSC conference once, which is International Council of Shopping Centers. And what that group does is they essentially kind of match communities with developers and retailers and restaurants. And it's a huge conference where deal making happens. And a few years ago, before COVID, I remember hearing, all you heard was Queen Creek, Queen Creek, Queen Creek, Queen Creek. Everybody wanted to be in Queen Creek. Everybody wanted to talk to Queen Creek, and they were known as the little darling of that conference. It was actually kind of funny. But their median household income in Queen Creek is $105,729, so significantly higher than our 45. And they also experienced a 125.8% increase in population. Wow, just booming. So I know there's people in this room that are just saying, we don't want that kind of growth. We don't want to see that many people here. We moved out here because we don't want all of that. And I completely understand that. I live out here too. But in the second breath, they'll say, but we want a movie theater, and we want Trader Joe's, and we want Costco. And so those two things are just sometimes inconsistent with what the data shows and where businesses want to locate. So I share this kind of just as a tool to help us measure and manage our expectations, because the reality is that growth matters and community makeup matters to businesses because they look at us on paper. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, oh, but we have the mountain. And we do have the mountain. But that data trumps the view every time, not every time, most times when it comes to business locates. So it's just a matter of dollars and cents. We did update, and I just tell you this for, again, managing expectations. There's a company called Retail Strategies. They're a consultant, and essentially what they do is they look very deeply at community demographics at a very granular level. So much so that they can tell me how many households in Apache Junction prefer butter over margarine in their purchasing. Not by household, don't worry. I don't know what your individual preference is. But they know so much about the people who live in our market area, not specifically AJ, but in our market area, and they know the retailer's blueprint and fingerprint of what kind of communities they want to go into. So they did an analysis for us. They came up with a list of 10 or 15 retailers that we potentially could go pursue that they said these are great matches for your community. And I'm all excited, and I see the email come in, and it has the list of, potential retailers. And to say I was a little disappointed at what I saw on that list would be an understatement. Because I want to have, what the community wants. I want to bring you all of the wonderful things and the, fancy restaurants. There wasn't even one sit-down restaurant on the list. It's like fast food, and here's the first one on the list, 7-Eleven. Who's going to get excited about 7-Eleven? Family Dollar, a UPS store, Advanced Auto Parts, Anytime Fitness, Cost Cutters. So you kind of get the sense of that's what the data shows that this community can support at this time. So when we talk about adding residents and we add, we talk about growing the population and diversifying a little bit, it matters if we care about raising the bar on some of these other things. If we want different things, we have to look a little bit different as a community. Nothing wrong with the way we look now, but if we want different things, then we have to be open to exploring other options. Okay, enough of that. Contrarily to the importance of that very localized data for retailers and restaurants, workforce needs are a little bit different. So if a large company is coming in and they need a workforce, they have a little bit more luxury because they can look beyond municipal boundaries. Typically, a 30-minute commute shed is what an employer, a large employer, will consider a reasonable commute to try to find employees in the area. So you can see here on this little map, Apache Junction is denoted by the little star on the right-hand side, where we are. The yellow line represents a 30-minute drive time commute. So our labor market actually encompasses a lot of the East Valley. So an employer can look here and say, I can reasonably find employees within this yellow line, and those blue dots indicate where the employment centers and clusters are. So the larger the dot, the larger the number of workers you will find in that particular area. So there's a more regional approach when it comes to workforce. This graph here demonstrates how jobs are related to where someone lives. So we've got just over 14,000 individuals in Apache Junction who are eligible to participate in the workforce. They haven't aged out, they're over 18, 14,000, and there's actually only 1,300, or just under 10%, that actually live here in the community and work here in the community. 90% of our workforce leaves Apache Junction to go drive elsewhere to get to work. So this is an indication that Apache Junction has a tremendous opportunity to bring some jobs here, and we can do that with our new state land that has come online. We'll have transportation corridors down there, the SR-24, there's a north-south corridor that's cited, and if we're smart about how we choose to zone land along freeway corridors, then we become a player. We can get in the game and we can bring jobs closer to home, and we can get you out of your car for the hours of a day that, or a week that you drive and have you home with your families. We really need to keep our local talent here working in the community. So that is a very, very big priority for us. What does economic development look like, though, in Apache Junction based on the strengths and opportunities we have? Well, the City Council adopted an EDAPT, a guiding document for economic development, about 13 years ago. And we've been kind of following that ever since. But with the state land development and with the freeway and transportation corridors that are going to be coming online, we said we need to update that because it didn't take any of that into account. So we're just wrapping that up. We're probably presenting to council in April. But interestingly, of those two studies, there were some things that really remained consistent, and that was the notion of diversification, focusing on downtown, and Apache Junction as a destination. So diversification is going to bring more living wage jobs to the community. As I mentioned, the SR 24 and the North-South Corridor Freeway is going to give us an opportunity to add more employment and more employment land uses to the mix. The Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport, of course, as you all know, has the SR 24 extension coming out of there. And really, if you've driven up the 101, if you've gone into the West Valley and driven along the 303, if you've seen what's happening around the airport in the 202, thousands of jobs are being created along those corridors. Everywhere you look, there's just industry. So we can do that too. And it doesn't have to block our mountain view. It will be way down south along the 24, so that's great for us. But we are at the cusp of being able to kind of get in this game. But downtown investment is still very important too. The city's main commercial corridor of Apache Trail still holds a lot of potential. Of course, you may or may not know it was at one time a state route, but it really feels nothing like a downtown. It's 6 lanes of traffic, it's got a super wide median, and when you think about downtowns and going to a place in a downtown, you would never imagine driving your car down to Apache Trail and saying this is it. In fact, over the years when we've looked at downtown, we've had a lot of people say, where is your downtown? They're not quite sure where it is. So we've tried to do some things along North Apache Trail area and then that surrounding development to make it start to feel more like a downtown. And we tried to do this by maybe priming the pump, if you will, by doing some public investments, doing some redevelopment projects for the city in hopes that the private sector would follow. And so we are seeing some of that. So we're going to have a little bit of fun here. I've just talked way too long. I need to show you some pictures, and I'm going to give you a quiz. And if you fail this quiz, Al will keep you late tonight. Right, Al? No. Okay, so anybody recognize this location and what it is? Okay, I'm going to give you another picture. This is a different structure, but near the same location. Nobody yet? Who's been here for more than 5 to 10 years? Okay. If you're new, I forgive you. Okay, this right here was and is now, right, it's the Old West Marketplace. So those blighted structures you saw in the previous picture sat for years on that corner. But with some collaboration with the property owners, we did some land swaps there. We sold off some underutilized right-of-way. We had a lot of work to get it over the finish line, but this development has created Blight into a very functional, lucrative shopping center for the city. And of course, as Leslie mentioned before, because we are a city that's so heavily reliant on sales tax, this matters for us. So this is important because the sales tax you pay when you go in and shop helps pay for your roads and your police and whatnot. So and it makes a visual difference. So a lot of people who drive through the community to go out to the lakes and whatnot, and they come down Idaho Road a lot of times, and when you see blight and abandoned buildings, you have a perception of a community. So when you can make enhancements and improvements, it starts to increase that perception and improve some negative stereotypes that might be out there. So I always remind people in this one, please shop AJ whenever you can. It's very important to shop local. All right, we're going to do another quick redevelopment quiz. Pretty sad looking stretch of roadway. Anybody know where this one is? Okay, I'm going to give you picture number 2. At one time, this road led to these beautiful buildings. Ding, ding. You're good at this. Okay, so this is now North Apache Trail. So we've not only improved this area, we started to add those more traditional elements that you find in a downtown. So the wide sidewalks, the street lights, the on-street parking. So because we had this big 6-lane, highway running through the middle of town, we're starting in a little core area and we're going to try to work our way out. Gives you a little bit more comfortable feel if you're driving through town, and if you happen to pass through those dilapidated buildings that had razor wire around them, are you going to stop in town if you're a visitor? Likely not. But if there's a park, a little splash pad, little restaurants across the street, it's more likely that it will attract new users. So why do we do redevelopment? Why do we focus on downtown? Because downtowns are ghost towns if people aren't there. So the more we can do to create vibrancy and the more reasons we can give people to go there, the better off we're going to be. Okay. Then the last one is kind of the focus area about tourism. And as I said, we're really blessed to have this mountain here. The great news for us is it's never going away. It's not a mine that's going to close, or it's not a big company that's going to shutter, and this thing's going to be here forever. So how do we take advantage of that? If I took a survey in this room, I would bet at least half of you would raise your hand and say, I moved out here, or I was intrigued to come out here and visit because of that mountain. And it's beautiful. So part of what we do is consider ways that we can take that mountain and translate it into an economic benefit for Apache Junction. So what do? We have to, raise the level of awareness. So we have to, just kind of let people know we're out here. And we've got a beautiful asset, and we've got a beautiful outdoor recreation area, and come visit us. What it means when people come and visit us is they might stop at the gas station and get some HERF funds, and they might stop and shop or eat or all of those things. And sometimes, many times, eventually become a resident of Apache Junction because they love it so much. So how do we increase our exposure? We have partnered with the Arizona Office of Tourism, and thanks to our, I don't know, have they met Matt yet? Matt McNulty, a very talented in-house creative person. So he has done some very custom tourism pieces over the years, and we have worked with the Office of Tourism through a program they offer. And we try to place ads where we think we might find people who would be interested in our community. So we actually did a limited study, too, a number of years back to find out when people come and visit here, where are they from? And so they can take data. Again, it's all about data. And we found out that most of our visitors here are from the Midwestern states, which was not a big surprise. But our second and third markets were Tucson, was our second most popular visitor to Apache Junction, and Phoenix. So we recognize that we've got not only an opportunity to reach people in the Midwest, but we have an opportunity to reach day trippers and people who are just wanting to get away from the urban areas. So we've created different pieces for different venues. The one on the lower right-hand corner, that's actually a billboard that was along I-10 to capture people who are driving in the city and say, hey, let's get out of here this weekend, and you can bike over there and you can mountain climb. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 So we've done a number of things, just kind of trying to see what sticks. We've done Pandora ads. We've done billboards. We've done, here is one that is actually a backlit sign that we had at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. It was phenomenal. It really was. I wish you could have seen it in person. It's no longer there, but we tried that one. Matt has actually designed those reusable shopping bags. You've probably seen him around town. I think he's on series number 5 now or so. And we actually also support the visitor center. So the Arizona Office of Tourism does a formal visitor program. So they designate different facilities throughout the state. So when visitors come in, they kind of know where to go to get information. And so we put a bid out for that every year, and the Chamber of Commerce has been working with us and been our consultant for that for a number of years. They do a great job. So we actually supply these bags over there too, so when visitors to the community do come in, they have a little gift to take away and remember Apache Junction favorably, hopefully. We've also just recently completed a total revamp of our Visit AJ Tourism website, and this website is completely separate from the city's website. And this is really intended for a visitor, not a local who knows what's kind of going on here. This is intended for somebody who is thinking about visiting Apache Junction. And I should back up. All of our tourism ads point to visitaj.com. So if you see a magazine ad, it will direct you to this. If you hear on Pandora, you know, visit AJ, it will direct you to this. This will be our landing page. So it will give people a reason to come into AJ. We've struggled for so many years with people driving through town, and we've said, how do we get them to stop in town and make it matter for us? And so this is what we've done. We've given them places to stay, we've given them places to eat, special events that might be happening, and so they can click on any of that information on the website and find out more about why it's a cool place to visit. And then prior, one of our other big projects that we did was an effort where we hired a contractor to do a tourism video for us. We know it's all about videos now, right? Everybody likes to watch a little video. So we actually wrapped this, I think it was the February before COVID hit. So we were going to do a big launch of this video, and then of course travel tanked and nobody was, you know, going anywhere, and we're like, what do we do? So we've actually held on to it. It's kind of timeless, as you'll see. I'll show it to you. But now that people are getting more comfortable and making travel plans again, we're gonna do a big launch of this one. We just think it's a really cool video. I'm gonna show you it's maybe 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes-ish, but they've done a couple 30-second spots with a lot of the same video, a little bit different scripts in there, but we can hopefully use those more on social media. So I'm gonna play this for you. Take a look. I hope you enjoy. This did not work earlier, so I'm gonna, yeah, same thing. I bookmarked it. That's okay, I bookmarked it. Because I knew that was gonna do that to me.
There's an undiscovered gold mine here in the Superstition Mountains. Hi, I'm Emily.
And I'm Toby, and we're here with Visit USA Parks in Apache Junction, Arizona.
Ouch!
AKA the desert.
We hear that there's an undiscovered gold mine here in the Superstition Mountains, and we love mystery.
And we love gold, so we're here to check it out for ourselves.
So we're going for a ride into the Superstition Mountains.
And remember that undiscovered gold mine? Well, we haven't found it yet, but we have learned that it's called the Lost Dutchman Mine.
Many people have gone missing in search of the gold, and the Apaches believe that it's protected by the Thunder God.
Who really knows? But we can find more answers at the Superstition Mountain Museum.
Or the Gold-filled Ghost Town. We just finished up lunch in downtown Apache Junction, and now we're gonna hit the road for a scenic drive, maybe with some stops along the way.
We're definitely stopping along the way.
All right, let's go. Good morning. Just leaving camp for a quick morning ride before the annual Lost Dutchman Days.
Apparently, we chose the right weekend to be here because it only happens once a year. See you later. And now we're here at the annual Lost Dutchman Days, checking out the carnival.
Can't wait to ride the rides and eat all the cotton candy. This weekend has been such a blast. Next time, we need to go hiking and get out on the water.
And we didn't strike gold, but we found even more reasons to come back to Apache Junction.
So we look at what our greatest assets are in the community. We try to make the most of it and bring business and prosperity to Apache Junction and enhance quality of life for everybody. So My contact information is here. If you have ideas, if you have suggestions, if you know of a business who is just crazy to get into Apache Junction, I would love to help them out. So happy to answer any questions now or contact me anytime.
Questions? Come on now. Well, at least Myra has a question. Okay, hold on a second.
Not to sound negative, but one of the reasons I moved here is to get away from the hustle and bustle. So what plans have you made so that I'm not back into that environment? Should economic growth
That's a great
continue?
question. That's a great question. And actually, you know, I've heard when we talk about the state land to the south, I've actually heard more people say, oh, we want it to feel like one community. We don't want it to feel like it's old Apache Junction and new Apache Junction. And I don't agree with that, because I think that there is plenty of room for preferred lifestyles. If you like living on an 1.25 acre lot and not having your neighbors right on top of you, we have a place for you. If you like having a seasonal residence here where you just can be a snowbird and come and hang out during our best months, we have a place for you. If you like to be in a master plan community where there's lots of activity, connectivity, city or neighborhood parks where the kids can play, we will have a place for you in our new master plan community. So I don't think, and I don't think it's the council's intention at all, to change any of the character of what we have here that makes Apache Junction up here in the north special. I agree, we all moved out here for a reason, and if it were to start to change too much, it wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't be the same. That said, there are parcels out there of property that people own and have a right to develop. So we can't get in the way of people who want to bring good quality development here to Apache Junction if they have the right to do that. I know that we have had some concern when we've had some higher density projects being brought to the downtown area. But in order to kind of support this vibrant downtown that we hear everybody wants, you have to have people kind of to support that as well. So there's a balance. There's definitely going to be a required balance to find, you know, what works for the folks who are already here and how we can attract more people to come. So I believe if your community is not growing, you're going to be dying. And that's a scary place to be, especially when you rely on sales tax to provide services. Because the more growth that starts happening around here, I guarantee you, if I said how many people have only shopped in the city of Apache Junction, nobody in here would raise their hand. Because you start to, and especially as development has occurred and grown closer and closer to us, you might tend to go, oh, I'm just gonna go over to Signal Butte Shopping Center because I can go to Sally and get my hair stuff, and I can go to Kohl's, and I can go to here and there. And it's very easy to do that. And so if we're not careful about how we create that balance, we're gonna start to lose traction, and that can be a scary place too. But I think, I'm sorry to circle back to your question, that was a super long answer. I think that it's going to be okay and probably beneficial to be able to say down south can be and feel like a different kind of community. Because people that don't want to live on 1.25 acre horse lots aren't going to be moving up here either. So they'll find something, you know, where it suits their needs. So especially in the Y area of Apache Junction, between, you know, kind of the focal point and, you know, the Y, the 88 and down Old West Highway, the city council has forever, since I've been here for 20 years, talked about that is the area that will be rural, and there are no street light requirements, no sidewalk requirements. They want that to feel very rural. So you won't see anything in that area that will change the character of the community. You may see something more down toward the downtown core that's going to have a little bit higher density housing and feel a little bit different than what we're used to, but I think it will all come in with a balance.
I'm more concerned with the congestion. I live in Gold Canyon, and the Renaissance Festival is just one of your examples. So if we're working to get more people here, what have we put in place so that the congestion is not going to be overwhelming for the residents that live here year-round?
Yeah, more roads. I mean, that's what it will equate to. So the SR 24, I know like there's a lot of people that live in Santan Valley that come up Ironwood that have concerns about that congestion. Well, they're in Queen Creek, they're enhancing roadways so people can get out of town. And a lot of that has to do with jobs though too. So if we can create jobs here, there's less people on the road. And to a point Leslie made earlier about people working from home, that's kind of changing and is going to change traffic patterns for daily commutes and whatnot. So we just have to plan for that and build more roads. I can't really speak to Gold Canyon as much. I know that there's been talk for years about the bypass, and I don't think that that's going to happen. I just don't think ADOT can fund that. But there is the north-south corridor. There are other freeways I know that Supervisor Surtee is talking about extending to relieve some of that congestion in Gold Canyon. But for us in Apache Junction, we are actually talking about, for the southern part of town, expanding Baseline to connect up, not Baseline, Meridian to connect up with Baseline, and widening Ironwood. So as this kind of growth occurs, you plan and you build more capacity, essentially. And sometimes that doesn't happen in a very balanced way, like did in Santan Valley, where they put 100,000 people down there with, 1 or 2 ways to get out of town. That's just not proper planning. So because we've got some great partners in the state land development down south, and they're anticipating, the 12,000 people that are going to live there, they are figuring out ways to get them efficiently from point A to point B. So it's a planning thing and a funding thing, and roads, of course, are expensive, but yeah, it's all part of the planning.
Have there been any projections on how the new demographics will change with the new development down south?
Yes, we're anticipating that there'll be younger, more family-oriented type of families that move into that area. I think there have been some suggestions about not including age-restricted communities. I think they may do that regardless, but we have a lot of interest actually up north here from people who want to put in more 55-plus parks because they think that's what we want, because that's what we have. And, to support our school district, we need to have families here. We need to put kids in the schools. We need to have people who are going to vote to pass an override or a bond to support the school district. We've got a lot of people, and I've heard it with my own ears, that I've put my kids through school. I don't want to pay for their, and there's other reasons people say no to kind of supporting schools. But, to make a community, diverse, you want to have options for everybody. I think what will happen is we've got to kind of have the market on that older demographic and places that they can feel comfortable here. I think that down south we'll have opportunities to bring more families. If you imagine if you've been to Eastmark and you've kind of driven around Eastmark and know the feel of that community, I think that's what we'll see more of down there. It's not going to feel like it does up here. We're not going to feel the open space and whatnot. It will be more family-oriented, more kind of clustered type of development. So we do anticipate, although we don't know exactly what that demographic will be, we do anticipate it will probably be a lower median age, a higher median income, and larger family sizes. I think we're at 2.2 persons per household now, so I think we'll see that increase as well. That's an excellent question, because people think all...
Leslie, Janine, repeat the question real quick.
Oh, how will that affect the business recruitment side of things? In some ways, it's going to be fantastic, because if we move, 10 or 12,000 people, I'll just use 10 for round numbers, 10,000 people in there, and we've got 1.5 workers per household, that's, a well-educated workforce, we'll potentially have 15,000 more people that an employer might, tap into that pool for workers. But in terms of kind of retail or restaurant, we've got people up here licking their chops because they're saying, ooh, we're going to have more restaurants coming and whatnot. But guess what? They're not going to move up here. They're going to want to be where that development and growth is occurring. So they'll more likely stay down there. So they do have 40 acres planned for commercial development in the new part of the project, the 4 square miles. So they'll see, they'll probably see a shopping center or two, a restaurant or two, some developments down there. but I don't think that it's going to directly impact our ability to attract. On paper, we'll have those numbers, but when they actually come then to look at the community, how retailers and restaurants, might select Apache Junction, but, within that area.
Will you do a data analysis on Apache Junction and the AGA expansion separately, or is that going to be all bunched together when you get to it?
That's an excellent question, too. Actually, what I wanted them to do when they did the analysis for me now in the update was to include projections for down south, but they weren't able to do that, because I want to be able to show the potential that we have. And that is really an excellent question, and I don't know the answer to how a consultant would handle that, because I think it will be drastically different. I think our numbers will start to look more like Queen Creek or Mesa in terms of median age and household income in that section of town. So overall, we'll start to balance out, which is a great thing for us. So I think they'll look at them holistically, because that is truly what the community, will look like. But in terms of site location, more specifically to retail and restaurant, it will probably be more site-based and where they fit in. Good question.
More questions. Okay, hold on.
Do you think that there's an opportunity or a potential that we might have a have and have not type situation because of that? Because of the divide?
I certainly hope not. So I know that in my mind, it's, I don't want to feel like two communities. I definitely want to feel like one community that has a lot of options to choose from. And I know that we are going to do everything in our power, and we are planning for how do you invite people and make them feel they're the newcomers, right? So whenever you're a newcomer, you're always figuring out how you fit in. But we're going out of our way to figure out how do we get those folks through our programs and through our park system and to make them feel like they're part of the community and come and want to participate with us. So I hope not is my answer to that. If we start to experience that or see that, we'll have to just come up with ideas of how we overcome that and make everybody feel like we're one community and we want to support one another. So that, our hope, too, is that as people get involved, we'll have Citizen Leadership Institute participants from that part of town. We'll have future leaders, in the community that want to run for city council. And I think as you start to integrate, it may take time for everybody to feel like they're one big happy family, but I know we can do it because that's what I hear more than anything I hear is what a friendly, wonderful community Apache Junction is and how great our people are. So I know that we will, we'll thrive. We'll thrive. I think this is going to be an addition. It's going to be different, but it's going to be an opportunity to really thrive.
Geography obviously plays a factor in all of that discussion, that there will likely be some arguments made at some point that we go to a district system for council. So you do have representation from sort of both areas, if you will, or the several areas. As Janine mentioned, if you look at our map and what the council has done, there is an automatic area of the northeast part of the city that is going to be lower density, period, because they've already established that. That's the large lot area, farther east as well. And then the central part of the city is, it's going to be a little bit more, dense, a little bit more like other places. And then you're going to have the folks, farther south. There's also another little area, just south of Baseline that could be developed. So all of that will be part of the equation, I think, in deciding maybe to change the council election system just for that.
Yeah, and I'm, suggesting that, but I think it is interesting because geographically right now, like where they're developing the first 500 homes down there, you physically cannot get to that area of Apache Junction without going through the city of Mesa to get there. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, the way they selected that, and I understand why they selected that particular piece of state land to auction, because it's kind of that continuation of that massive growth that's already happening there, and they're building out, and the next logical place to go is Apache Junction. So, but right now, you literally have to go through Mesa and then cut back over to get there. That will change, obviously, once the roads start going in, and once they, and the second phase of the project will be adjacent to Ironwood, so that will change. But yeah, it's going to be working through some adjustments for sure, and it's significant. What our population now is, what are we at?
38,000,
38,499, right?
correct.
And adding potentially 12,000 homes, we nearly could double our population in 10 years. So, yeah.
More questions? Okay, everybody has a favorite restaurant. What do you guys want? Come on. You like our restaurants? Good, very good. Make sure you stay going to our restaurants and shopping in Apache Junction. Okay, I again, Janine hit it. Everybody goes to Signal Butte. Why do you go to Signal Butte? Tell the truth. There is a couple of choices down there.
You need to change your motto about Signal Butte, though. You need to start saying Signal Butte is my nemesis, because that's what I say. Signal Butte is my nemesis because it's so close. And if you think about why shopping local matters, you support your own city, you support your own police officers, you support your own parks. But if you live on one of those communities that's along the 60, guess what? It's easier for you to go to Walmart at Signal Butte than it is for you to drive up here into town. But yeah, and you know what? And that used to really be troublesome. Thank you, Leslie, for bringing that up. Before the Wayfair case equalized kind of that brick and mortar versus online shopping thing, we had tremendous leakage because people would drive over to Signal Butte and shop, and we got zero of those sales tax dollars. Mesa got all that money. So when you shopped, you weren't supporting your community. You should. But now with online, and we do get a little piece of that pie for that sales tax, it does come back to the city. Here's me. Shop Kohl's online all the time. I don't get, because we do get a little piece of that pie. So if you can't shop at a brick and mortar in Apache Junction, shop online. And everybody needs to wear, did you give them their ankle bracelets? So when you cross over Meridian, your ankle bracelet buzzes you, and turn around and come back and you shop this way. I have one of those too. Thank you all so much. Please reach out to me. I would love to chat more with you if you've got some ideas about growing Apache Junction. Thank you.
Janine Solly, ladies and gentlemen. Remember to go to Walmart on Delaware, not in Signal Butte. And tell all your friends in Mesa, if they want to go to Harley-Davidson, where do they have to come? This side of Meridian, so don't forget that. Safeway, fries. Okay, everybody got any other last-minute questions for our presenters? You want to take a quick? We can take a really quick break, and then I'm going to run through one section, and I'm going to let you guys go home early. You want to keep going? Break time? Keep going? Break. Let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back at 8:05. Okay, are we all back? Are we missing anybody? Look around. Good. Okay, we're going to close up shop here in just a little bit, but I at least wanted to, like I said, introduce to you all this section that we would have had done tonight. Fox Young, who runs our revenue development area, is out ill, but like I said, we will reschedule him for another night, so make sure we get in there. The biggest thing to take away from his presentation, or one of the biggest things to take away from his part of the city, is that in addition to all the regular operations the city has, there is also what you would essentially call a nonprofit arm to the city. And that arm helps to generate grants, nonprofit interaction, and a number of things that are not part of the formal budget in a lot of ways, as we've talked about before, including trying to help some of our residents out there who need a little help, and to try to improve areas of the city that have fallen under disrepair or blight of some sort. And so there's a couple of ways in which the city can do that. So the revenue development includes, as I was going to mention, two areas, two groups that can act sort of in tandem with the city, but are technically separate. One is the Friends of AJ, that is the nonprofit arm. As I was saying before, they're allowed to raise money that the city can use, and if donations come to the city, it usually goes through Friends of Apache Junction. The other group that I was referring to is the Community Development Corporation, and that's the group that you may see out doing cleanups and doing other help in the areas around town where folks have let their phones go into disrepair for any number of reasons. They're not able to keep it up, and we can step in and try to help. That particularly involves folks who either are unable or are a little bit older and have a harder time trying to keep up. So that is the CDC, the Community Development Corporation. Both of those groups have boards. Both of those groups are very much looking for folks like yourselves who want to get involved to help carry out their mission. Fox's area also, of course, as I said, also includes the grant writing and the grant production area, as well as corporate partnerships. So, for example, you will see across the street very soon when the dog park opens, there will be some companies that are involved in helping pay for all the amenities at the dog park. That falls under that corporate sponsorship logo. A lot of our events that Parks produces get some help from different companies throughout the city. So he will go into a little more detail on some of these areas, but please be aware that they do exist, and they are an important part of the city operation, because those are areas, like I said, that are not funded by traditional budget means, and therefore would not happen without corporate backing, without nonprofit backing, without volunteer assistance. And again, remember, one of the things that Fox and other folks probably will mention in different presentations throughout the class is we are always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for folks that can come help us out, whether it's in parks, in the library, and even at the police department. Believe it or not, we have not just retired officers, but folks from the community who help the police department in a lot of different ways. There's a whole auxiliary program. There's also a couple of volunteers who actually work cold cases over at PD. Very interesting, to say the least. Again, the two areas that I mentioned before, Friends of AJ and the CDC, they both act on behalf of the city or for the city in different ways in the community. And again, we'll have Fox go through all of that when he gets a chance. One of the things that they have worked on, in addition to the cleanup, is Focal Point. The CDC is behind Make a Difference Day, which is in the fall. They have worked on a number of big projects throughout the city, including the median. If you have lived here for any length of time, the median of Apache Trail is sort of the last piece of the puzzle in a lot of ways. Apache Trail used to be a road in very much disrepair until we got the 0.2% sales tax. So several years ago, we were able to put that in place to pay for the repaving of Apache Trail, which is a beautiful, beautiful road, this big, wide road. The last piece of that puzzle is the median. The median was essentially nothing more than a flood control project because it's just straight, dirt, median. Well, over the last couple of years, we have now been able to really beautify from Meridian East and a little bit down here, and it's going to connect pretty soon, that continues to still function as a flood control project, but obviously will look a lot nicer than it did before. The CDC, like I said, involved in a lot of the cleanups in the city, and you should be aware of that. But we will have, like I said, Fox talk a little bit more about that when he gets a chance to come. Now, before I'll finish a couple of, if there's anybody who has some really strong feelings or some feedback on State of the City, I would love to hear that. If anybody has some general questions about some things that are going on in the city, I will go ahead and address those right now too, if you're wondering. And I wanted to just see a show of hands real quick of folks who actually live, because I'm trying to remember, within the city limits of Apache Junction. Okay. If any of you have desire to want to do something within the city, boards and commissions, but not quite the formal board, something much less than that, probably a group that only meets a couple times a year, please come see me after we're done with class. State of the City, any questions or feedback of any sort from folks who attended? The food was from Handlebar, if you're wondering. It was pretty good. This is our fourth, I believe, State of the City. It's a nice way to inform our citizens about things that are going on if you're not able to to pay attention all the time, especially without one of the challenges I will tell you, and I think I mentioned that first class, and will probably tell you again, by the last class, and that is, getting information to all our citizens is a challenge now. We do not have the mass media avenues that we used to have, and that are in a lot of other areas outside of us. We do not have a daily newspaper. We don't even have a weekly newspaper. We have a monthly. We have 2 monthlies technically. That's not a real easy way to get the word out if I have road closures on Ironwood like we're going to have beginning on Monday. How do I get that out to everybody? Not an easy thing to do. Yes, I can use some social media. I can use some of those electronic avenues, but as I think Janine made mention of, and maybe Leslie did as well, we've come to find out that not only is our community a little under income than other areas, it turns out to be also a little bit underconnected than other areas. So the census that was just completed in 2020 that shows we have 38,499 people. It also shows, I think we had about a little over 12,000 residences in the city. Of those 12,000 residences, almost 3,000 of them do not have a broadband connection in their home. Now, they could still have a smartphone, they could still have other ways of connecting, but they do not have broadband. So we're guessing that some of those folks are probably not online very much. And if they are, they're not necessarily getting a lot of their information about the city from those sources. How do I get information and news to those people? How does anybody get information to those people? Now you're looking at one of the challenges of the city of Apache Junction. So one of the places that we try to do is we try to do events. We try to get out and talk to folks at events. I will be in a booth at Lost Dutchman Days this weekend. Of course, now that's not all residents of the city. We draw people from all over the place there, so it's not just city news in this case. But it is something to think about when you are part of a community like that. How do we develop those networks? How do we develop more information? So the State of the City is one way we can do it. Hopefully, we will find a number of other ways to do that as well. All right. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. So the question is, what have we seen as far as the changes in attendance over the 4 years? I believe this was the most well-attended of the 4 years. We had about 130 people attend. I did not get, I know I meant to look to see what our online attendance was as well, since we did stream it, and of course posted that video on YouTube as well. It's always good to look at those numbers. I think we started that first year with maybe 75 people. And then, of course, last year, we did it essentially all online. It was all streamed. We did have a small group in here, but we did not do it in a public way. But I do believe that's our most well-attended so far. So from that standpoint, yeah, I would consider it to be a success in that way. I think it's still a challenge, though. We just had a discussion about Studies of the City today. How do you keep that fresh? How do you keep that that kind of format, given the personalities that you have within the city, certainly in the mayor's office, and what you have to communicate, because there is certainly some things that we'd love to get across to everybody, not always the most interesting things, so you do have to be a little more creative in trying to get that stuff across. So I think that's a good question to ask, especially after a couple of years now. What else can we do? Should maybe the Chamber of Commerce take a role in that particular, should nonprofits take, a role in that particular event? There's a number of things that can happen there. Other cities do it a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Okay. Real-time polling? Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think you've kind of hit on what has to happen in those kind of situations. So how do you make it a little more interactive? How do you make it a little bit more in real time? So all of the things you're talking about there are done in real time. It's actually with the audience that's there. They're able to interact with either the speaker or like the real-time polling or anything along those lines. And certainly it seemed to catch a little bit of fire. I have not seen as much of it lately. So it's interesting to hear that was used. I think you do have to look at, is there a way to sort of inject a little energy into something like that? It's a one-way event at this point right now. It is a speech given to the people. It's a video that we showed everybody. I think you probably have a good point there in how do you make it a little bit, like I said, maybe inject a little bit of energy into it. It's a good point. Yes, sir.
That was the first day of the city I'd ever attended, so I was glad to be invited to that.
First one for Jeff. Not all cities have it. A lot of cities do. They all do it a little bit different. Like I said, there are several cities whose chambers of commerce, run that particular event, and it's very different event. It's very commercial. It is a lot of corporate sponsorship, and you have to pay to get in, and it's a little bit different level than what we have here. I think we're still in the, we'd like to keep it simple. I think we have a clientele that likes to keep it simple. Having said that, if the Chamber of Commerce came to us and said, hey, we would like to try to take this over, it would be a very different event, I would assume. Pros and cons to all of those things. Part of growing up, as we talked about before today. Okay, more questions. We will be back in 2 weeks right here at this very place. Hopefully I will see you this weekend at Lost Dutchman Days. If not, we sure hope you enjoy the weekend no matter what you do. Please stay safe out there. It's kind of cold, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Everybody drive home safely.